a ship the size of a city block, moving in silence, and on each side, less than a meter of clearance. It goes up, 26 meters above sea level, then comes back down, using nothing but water, every single day. The Panama Canal handles roughly 3% of all world trade, not of one country, the entire planet. And to build it, someone had to figure out how to move a mountain, tame a river that couldn't be tamed, and win a war against an enemy you couldn't even see. Here's what makes this story different from what you've probably heard. The hardest part wasn't cutting through rock. It was figuring out what to build in the first place. And the people who got that wrong, they paid with 22,000 lives. Before we build anything, we have to understand what we're actually looking at. Find Panama on a map. That thin strip connecting North and South America. At its narrowest point, the Atlantic and Pacific are separated by about 80 kilometers of jungled mountains and rivers. 80 kilometers. The distance you drive to visit someone a couple of towns over. But for centuries, every ship that needed to cross from one ocean to the other had to go the long way. All the way around South America. Down past Patagonia, around Cape Horn. A stretch of water where 3 different ocean systems collide. Where waves come from every direction at once, and where the wind doesn't negotiate. Between 1800 and 1900, over 800 ships were lost trying that route. Cargo gone, crews gone, families waiting for ships that never came back. The route added roughly 14,000 miles to any voyage. 3 months at sea minimum. And everyone could see the solution, right there on the map, that 80-kilometer strip of land. So why did it take until 1914 to cut through it? Because the land fought back. And the first attempt to pierce it became one of the most catastrophic engineering failures in history. The man who tried first had already done the impossible. Ferdinand de Lesseps, French diplomat, the man behind the Suez Canal, 193 kilometers of waterway carved through Egyptian desert, finished in 1869. The French called him Le Grand Français. He was 74 years old. He wasn't an engineer, and he was convinced Panama would be easy. His plan: a sea-level canal. No locks, no lakes, no complications. Just dig a straight trench from one coast to the other and let the 2 oceans meet. It worked in Egypt. Egypt is flat. Egypt is a desert. Panama receives up to 3 meters of rain per year. The ground isn't sand. It's a dense living clay that swells when it gets wet and flows when it's disturbed. Right through the middle of the proposed route ran the Chagres River, capable of rising 9 meters in a single night after heavy rainfall. 9 meters. A 3-story building appearing in the middle of your construction site while you sleep. A sea-level canal through this terrain meant one thing. You were at war with the river. Every day. Forever. But the French didn't know that yet. They started digging in 1881. The geology punished them immediately. The hillsides weren't stable. They'd excavate thousands of cubic meters during the day. By morning, the slope had collapsed back in. Machines buried, trenches refilled, progress erased overnight, and then the disease arrived. Yellow fever. Workers came from France, from Barbados, from Jamaica. They started dying almost immediately. Fever, chills, yellowed skin, black vomit, malaria too, slower but just as relentless. The French had built a hospital. Beautiful facility, well-staffed. Around each bed, they placed trays of water at the legs to keep ants from climbing up. Standing water in a tropical rainforest. Those trays were perfect breeding pools for the Aedes aegypti mosquito, the exact species that carries yellow fever. Nobody knew it yet. The connection between mosquitoes and disease wouldn't be proven until 1899. The hospital was manufacturing the plague it was trying to cure. Between 1881 and 1889, somewhere between 22 and 25,000 workers died. Numbers officially underreported. Men buried in the jungle before their families knew they were sick. In 1889, the company collapsed. Bankruptcy, one of the largest financial failures in French history. Nearly 800,000 individual investors, regular people who trusted the legend, lost everything. The jungle swallowed the attempt whole. Rusted machinery left in the mud. Half-dug trenches filling slowly with water. But here's what the French left behind without knowing it. Maps, surveys, and a partially dug route. Someone else would come back for it. The United States took over the project in 1904. Theodore Roosevelt, not a man who accepted obstacles, made the canal his mission. He bought the French equipment, negotiated control of a strip of land across Panama, and declared the thing would be built. But before a single American shovel broke ground, the new chief sanitary officer, Dr. William Gorgas, made something very clear. The French hadn't failed because of bad engineering. They'd failed because they didn't understand what was killing their workers. Gorgas had already solved yellow fever in Havana after the Spanish-American War. He knew the enemy wasn't the jungle or the rain or the air. It was the mosquito. The campaign he launched in Panama was unlike anything attempted before. Every pool of standing water near the construction zone, drained, oiled or filled, window screens installed in every worker building, sick workers isolated behind mosquito nets. Fumigation teams moved house to house, burning pyrethrum. The flower pots around the hospital, removed. By 1906, yellow fever was essentially gone from the canal zone. Gone. The disease that had killed tens of thousands of French workers ended through organization, drainage, and the understanding that the real enemy was invisible and flew on wings. Most people who've heard of the Panama Canal have never heard of William Gorgas. But without him, the canal doesn't get built. The workforce keeps dying, the project collapses again, and that strip of jungle stays impassable for another generation. The first engineering problem the Americans solved wasn't in the ground. It was in the air. Now the real question: how do you actually build a canal? The French answer, sea level, had been proven catastrophically wrong. The Chagres River alone made it impossible. A sea level trench would require controlling that river completely, year-round, forever. No dam could reliably do that. And the excavation required would be nearly double what the lock solution demanded. Chief Engineer John Stevens looked at the geography in 1905 and made the call: locks. Think of it as an elevator made entirely of water. The canal wouldn't run at sea level. At its center, it would sit about 26 meters above sea level, roughly the height of an 8-story building. Ships wouldn't sail uphill. They'd be lifted. Here's the mechanics. A ship enters a lock chamber, a giant rectangular concrete box, 304 meters long, 33.5 meters wide. Steel gates close behind it. These gates weigh up to 750 tons each, but they're engineered with such precision, hollow, counterweighted, buoyancy controlled, that a single person could move them with a hand lever. 750 tons, moved by hand. Valves open in the floor and walls of the chamber. Water flows in from a reservoir above, not pumped, just gravity. The water level rises. The ship rises with it. When the chamber is full and level with the next section, the front gates open. The ship moves forward. 3 chambers on the Atlantic side stepping up. Then the ship crosses the lake. Then 3 chambers on the Pacific side stepping down. Each cycle takes about 10 minutes. The whole transit, ocean to ocean, takes roughly 10 hours. 10 hours to cross what once took 3 months. And the decision to use locks solved the second problem at the same time, a problem that had destroyed the French, the Chagres River. Instead of fighting it, the Americans would use it. They built the Gatun Dam across the Chagres, the largest earthen dam in the world at the time. The river backed up, 465 square kilometers of jungle flooded, villages relocated, ancient trees swallowed, hilltops turned to islands. What emerged was Gatun Lake, the largest artificial lake on the planet when it was completed. And this lake wasn't just a reservoir. It was part of the canal itself. Ships didn't just cross it, they navigated through it for nearly 30 kilometers, 85 feet above sea level. The river that had been the French company's nightmare became the engine of the American solution. The enemy became the engine. The locks were brilliant. The lake was brilliant. But between them sat 8 miles of solid mountain. The continental divide cut straight through Panama. To connect the lake to both oceans, the engineers had to slice through it. This was the Culebra Cut, later renamed the Culebra Cut, and it nearly broke the entire project. At its deepest point, workers excavated over 100 meters below the original surface. The numbers from this section alone are almost incomprehensible. Over 96 million cubic meters of material removed, 4,500 tons of dynamite, steam shovels, the most advanced earth-moving machines in the world at the time, working in shifts 24 hours a day. But the geology of Culebra was unlike anything the engineers had prepared for. The rock wasn't solid. It was clay, shale, and volcanic material. And when that material got wet, it didn't just soften, it moved. Engineers called it plastic flow. The hillsides behaved like extremely slow liquid. As workers removed material from the cut, they also removed the pressure that had been holding the surrounding slopes in place. So the slopes crept inward, slowly, silently, constantly. You'd excavate an area, walk away, come back a week later, and find the hillside had pushed back in. Not collapsed in a dramatic landslide, just returned, as if the mountain was breathing. In 1913, 6 months before the scheduled opening, one of the largest slides in the cut's history deposited 2 million cubic meters of material back into the channel. Months of work gone overnight. The response was to dig it out again. And when it slid again, dig again. The engineer who drove this section was David Gaillard. He gave everything to that cut, his focus, his health, his sleep. The pressure eventually caused a mental breakdown and he was sent home to the United States. He died in 1913. The man who broke himself to force that mountain open never saw it work. That still happens. People pour everything into something and miss the moment of completion by inches. It's not a historical curiosity. It's a pattern. And the mountain is still moving. The Canal Authority still dredges the Gaillard Cut regularly, removing material that continues to creep down the hillsides more than a century after the first shovel broke ground. Here's something nobody tells you about crossing the canal. The ship's captain, the man who has navigated oceans, commanded that vessel for years, hands over control the moment he enters. A Panama Canal pilot boards, specially trained, knows every centimeter of the route, every current, every pressure shift inside the locks. The captain becomes a passenger on his own ship. The reason? The margins inside the locks are measured in centimeters. A lock chamber 33.5 meters wide, receiving a ship 32 meters wide. Less than a meter of space on each side. At those tolerances, the ship's own engines are useless. Any movement they create is too large, too unpredictable. So the vessel is guided by small electric locomotives that run on tracks along the lock walls. These locomotives, called mules, attach to the ship via steel cables and walk alongside it, keeping the vessel perfectly centered as the water rises or falls. A single large ship might have 8 to 12 of these mulas working simultaneously, pulling from the front to maintain forward movement, holding from the sides to keep it centered, braking from behind to control speed. The whole system operates like a single choreography. Every cable tensioned to specific tolerances, every movement planned. Meanwhile, the lock gates open and close in under 2 minutes. The water fills or drains through tunnels built into the chamber walls, not visible, just hidden pipes moving millions of gallons without a single pump. Pure gravity. From the outside, it looks like magic. A ship that weighs tens of thousands of tons rises silently inside a concrete box, pushed by nothing but water finding its own level. The smallest toll ever paid to cross the canal was 36 cents in 1928 by Richard Halliburton, an adventurer who swam the entire length over 10 days and was charged by weight, 150 pounds. The highest toll in recent years, over $800,000 for a single large container ship. Same water, same locks, same gravity. 36 cents to $800,000. The canal opened on August 15, 1914. The SS Ancon made the first official transit. The world barely noticed. Europe had just exploded into the First World War 6 weeks earlier. But the impact was immediate and permanent. New York to San Francisco, from 14,000 miles to roughly 5,000. A reduction of 64%. Every shipping route that had used Cape Horn became obsolete or economically unviable overnight. New ports rose. New trade patterns emerged. Entire industries that had been built around the long route began to disappear. The canal didn't just shorten voyages. It changed which cities grew, which countries became trade hubs, which navies could project power and where. The geometry of global commerce was redrawn. In 2006, Panama voted to expand. A third lane, new larger locks capable of handling a new generation of ships called Neo-Panamax vessels. These ships carry up to 14,000 shipping containers each. The original locks could handle around 5,000. The expansion cost $5 billion and took a decade. It opened in 2016. The canal grew to meet the world. But here's what nobody was thinking about in 1914. And what's becoming the central problem of the 21st century? The canal runs on fresh water. Every ship that transits uses roughly 200 million liters of water from Gatun Lake, water that drains through the locks into the oceans and is gone. The lake refills from rainfall. Panama historically receives some of the heaviest rainfall on Earth. That was the assumption the entire system was built on. In 2023, a severe El Niño drought hit Panama. Gatun Lake levels dropped below the minimum needed for full operations. The Canal Authority cut daily transits from around 36 ships to roughly 18. Ships queued for weeks at both ends of the canal. Some companies ran the numbers and rerouted their ships around Cape Horn, the same route the canal was built to eliminate. For the first time in decades, the old nightmare was back. The engineers who built this in the early 20th century solved every problem of their era. They figured out the locks. They moved the mountain. They turned the river into a lake. They eliminated disease from the construction zone. They didn't solve the weather. Panama is now investing in new reservoirs and water conservation systems. The problems are probably solvable, but for the first time in a century, the question isn't just how do we build this, it's how do we keep this running in a world changing faster than the infrastructure can adapt. Stand at the Miraflores locks and watch a ship go through 300 meters of steel, tens of thousands of containers stacked like city blocks, moving in a silence that doesn't feel possible for something that size. Millimeter clearance on each side, rising slowly, steadily, pushed by nothing but water. What you're looking at is the result of the wrong idea tried at enormous cost, followed by the right idea executed at even greater cost. 25,000 dead, French and American combined. 33 years from the first French shovel to the first ship crossing. The largest peacetime use of explosives in history. A river turned into a lake, a mountain sliced open, and tens of thousands of Caribbean laborers from Barbados and Jamaica who dug most of it by hand and whose names appear in none of the monuments built to celebrate it. The people who built this thought they were solving a logistics problem, cutting travel time, reducing shipping costs. What they actually built was the circulatory system of modern global trade. 80 kilometers. That's the width of the scar. Every day, ships from China, Brazil, South Korea, Norway, carrying cars, grain, electronics, oil, pass through it in about 10 hours, over the graves of the men who made it possible. A wound on the planet that the planet couldn't heal, and that the world can't live without. If you made it this far, you already know you're not the average viewer. The algorithm doesn't care about history. It cares about what you do in the next 10 seconds. If the image of those mullahs walking silently alongside a 30,000-ton ship stayed with you, if a mountain that slides back every time you cut it feels like something worth knowing, subscribe. Leave a comment about what surprised you most. Was it the hospital breeding the disease it was treating? The river that became the lake? The mountain that's still moving? And if you know someone who would spend 30 minutes learning something real instead of scrolling through nothing, send this to them. History is full of stories this good. We're just getting started.